Hi, folks. Hope you're okay. It's good to be with you. I just want to bring your attention to an issue concerning Karl Popper and evolution. Karl Popper was on record. Karl Popper was one of the most famous philosophers of science in the 20th century, and he was on record of saying that evolution is not falsifiable. So later on in his life, I've used this a number of times as an argument against evolution, and there are those who've come back at that and made videos over the last few years who basically said, well, that's wrong because Karl Popper recanted near the end of his life, and they cite a paper a lecture that Karl Popper did, Natural Selection and the Emergence of Mind, delivered at Darwin College, Cambridge, November 8th, 1977. And the argument goes that Karl Popper recanted his view that natural selection is not verifiable. And there are a couple of key points where people have quoted it and said, look, it's very obvious that he believed in evolution, and and that it was verifiable. And they use this lecture, and there are one or two quotes that you can make. So he says this when speak. So I want to just address number one. What was Karl Popper's view on evolution? That's first thing. Did he see it as a theory that was unfalsifiable, or did he recant? Did he change his mind? And to just look at that, and then secondly, I actually want to just think about the point that he was getting at in his article, and then just give my thoughts about the emergence of mind and evolution, and the logical contradictions within evolution. And when I'm talking about evolution, I'm on about evolution over millions, billions of years. Okay. And before anybody starts, natural selection is a specific aspect which we'll be looking at as well. So Karl Popper says this in his lecture on the natural selection and its scientific status. Just before that, he writes, the counter-revolution against science is intellectually unjustifiable. Morally, it is indefensible. On the other hand, scientists should resist the temptations of scientism. This is really key. They should always remember, as I think Darwin always did, that science is tentative and fallible. Science does not solve all the riddles of the universe, nor does it promise ever to solve them. Nevertheless, it sometimes throws some unexpected light even on our deepest and probably insoluble riddles. Now, that is a very, very important point, I think, from Karl Popper. And I think the people who said that he recanted and he changed his position need to put it in the context of his overall understanding of the role of science. This is completely different from the kind of megalomaniac kind of scientism of many atheists today, especially people like Richard Dawkins. Here is a much more humble view of science and a more realistic view of science. And you must see that in the context of Karl Popper's understanding of evolution. So we go on. When speaking here of Darwinianism, I speak always of today's theory, that is Darwin's own theory of natural selection supported by the Mendelian theory of heredity, by the theory of mutation and recombination of genes in a gene pool, and by the decoded genetic code. This is a immensely impressive and powerful theory. The claim that it completely explains evolution is of course a bold claim, and very far from being established. See, when people are quote mining and using quotes to go against each other, so I'll say, well, Karl Popper said that evolution is unfalsifiable. Then the counter critic will say, oh no, he recanted. Well, let's do the scholarship. Let's look at the lecture. He's very clearly stating there that it is immensely impressive and powerful theory. The claim that it completely explains evolution is of course a bold claim, and very far from being established. All scientific theories are conjectures, even those that have successfully passed many severe and varied tests. The Mendelian underpinning of modern Darwinism has been well tested, and so has the theory of evolution, which says that all terrestrial life is evolved from a few primitive unicellular organisms, possibly even from one single organism. Now notice this. However, Darwin's almost important contribution to the theory of evolution, his theory of natural selection, is difficult to test. There are some tests, even some experimental tests, and in some cases, such as the famous phenomenon known as industrial millennialism, we can observe natural selection happening under our very eyes, as it were. Nevertheless, really severe tests of the theory of natural selection are hard to come by, much more so than tests of otherwise comparable theories in physics or chemistry. The fact that the theory of natural selection itself is difficult to test has led some people, anti-Darwinists and even some great Darwinists, to claim that it is a tautology. A tautology, like all tables are tables, is not of course testable, nor is it any explanatory power. It is therefore more surprising to hear that some of the greatest contemporary Darwinists themselves formulate the theory in such a way that it amounts to the tautology, that those organisms that leaves most offspring leaves most offspring. And C.H. Waddington even says somehow, and he defends this view in other places, that natural selection turned out to be a tautology. However, he attributes the same place to the theory of enormous power of explanation. Since the explanatory power of a tautology is obviously zero, something must be wrong here. Yet, similar passage can be found in the works of such great Darwinians as Ronald Fisher, J.B.S. Haldane, George Gallimore Simpson, and others. I mention this problem because I too belong among the culprits. Influenced by what these authorities say, I have in the past described the theory as almost tautological, and I have tried to explain how the theory of natural selection could be untestable as is a tautology, and yet of great scientific interest. My solution was that the doctrine of natural selection is most successful metaphysical research program. It raises detailed problems in many fields, and it tells us what we would expect of an acceptable solution of these problems. I still believe that natural selection works in this way as a research program. Nevertheless, I have changed my mind about the testability and the logical status of the theory of natural selection. I am glad to have an opportunity to make a recantation. Here it is. My recantation may, I hope, contribute to a little understanding of the natural selection. What is important to realize the explanatory task of natural selection, and especially to realize what we can explain about without the theory of natural selection. Notice this. What is important is to realize the explanatory task of natural selection, and especially to realize what can be explained without the theory of natural selection. We may start from the remark that for sufficiently small and reproductively isolated populations, the Mendelian theory of genes and theory of mutation and recombination together suffice to predict, without natural selection, what has been called genetic drift. If you isolate a smaller number of individuals from the main population and prevent them from interbreeding with the main population, then after a time the distribution of genes in the gene pool of the new population will differ somewhat from that of the original population. This will happen even if selection pressures are completely absent. Maurice Wenger, contemporary of Darwin and of course pre-Mendelian, was aware of the situation. He therefore introduced a theory of evolution by genetic drift, made possible by reproductive isolation through geographical separation. In order to understand the task of natural selection, it is good to remember Darwin's reply to Maurice Wagner. Darwin's main reply to Wagner was, if you have no natural selection, you cannot explain the evolution of the apparently designed organs like the eye or other words without natural selection. You cannot solve Paley's problem. In its most daring and sweeping form, the theory of natural selection would assert that all organisms, and especially all those highly complex organs whose existence might be interpreted as evidence of design, and in addition all forms of animal behavior, have evolved as the result of natural selection. That is, as the result of chance-like, inheritable variations of which these useless ones are weeded out so that only the useful ones remain. If formulated in this sweeping way, the theory is not only refutable, but actually refuted. For not all organs serve as useful purposes. Let's just read that again. In its most daring and sweeping form, the theory of natural selection would assert that all organisms, and especially all those highly complex organisms whose existence might be interpreted as evidence of design, and in addition all forms of animal behavior, have evolved as the result of natural selection, that is, as the result of chance-like inheritable variations, of which these useless ones are weeded out, so that only useful ones remain. If formulated in this sweeping way, the theory is not only refutable, but it actually refuted, for not all organisms serve as a useful purpose, as Darwin as himself points out. There are organs like the tail of a peacock and behavioral programs like the peacock's display of his tail, which cannot be explained by utility, and therefore not by natural selection. Darwin explained them by the preference of the other sex, that is, by sexual selection. Of course, one can get round this refutation by some verbal maneuver. One can get round any refutation of any theory, but then one gets near to rendering the theory tautological. It seems far preferable to admit that not everything that evolves is useful, though it is astonishing how many things are, and that in conjecturing what is the use of an organ or a behavioral program, we can conjecture as possible explanation by natural selection of why it evolved in the way it has, perhaps even of how it evolved. In other words, it seems to me that like so many theories in biology, evolution by natural selection is not strictly universal, though it seems to hold for a vast number of important cases. According to Darwin's theory, sufficiently oh, I just to get sorry about that. Sorry about that. So, according to Darwin's theory, sufficiently invariant selection pressure may turn the otherwise random genetic drift into a drift that has the appearance of being purposely directed. In this way, the selection pressure, if there are any, will leave their imprint upon the genetic material. It may be mentioned, however, that there are selection pressures that can operate successfully over very short periods. One severe epidemic may leave alive only those who are genetically immune. I may sum up what I've said so far about Darwin's theory of natural selection. Here it is now. The theory of natural selection may be so formulated that it is far from tautological. In this case, it is not only testable, but it turns out to be not strictly universally true. Now here's the point. Karl Popper has said in past that evolution is not falsifiable. And what he's done here, reading his lecture, is he says that he's recanted, and then he's given his arguments concerning natural selection. And no one could argue concerning genetic drift. No one could argue against these things. We know that these things happen. Even though he admits that it's very hard to test. I mean, he has admitted that. But he's not actually shown how this relates to evolution over long periods of time. Again, he's making a logical fallacy. He's saying that we can falsify it in terms of what we see in time. But he hasn't got out of the tautological problem because he's not dealt with, he's assuming because it works in time, i.e. because it works in time what we can observe, it therefore will work on a longer period of history. And that is an assumption, it's a tautology. It's just evolution happens because it happens basis. You cannot observe over millions and millions of years natural selection. You can't observe that process. You can observe micro evolution, but you cannot observe macroevolution. So, as great mind as Karl Popper has, he's contradicting himself. He's saying that he's recanted, but he's actually not recanted. He actually has not reversed the position that it's not falsifiable. It is not possible to falsify macroevolution, the process, because it's not testable. It's not testable. It's one of the most, it is probably the most dogmatic, insane scientific theory that has been known to man. It is more dogmatic than the Catholic Church was in the Middle Ages. This is that, you know, evolution happens over long periods of time, macroevolution, because it happens over long periods of time. Karl Popper has not dealt with that issue. He's just dealing with something that we can observe in time, in our lifetime, that nobody would particularly disagree with. So when people are using saying, oh, Karl Popper's recanted, well, and even in the recantation that he's made, there are some contradictions within that recantation. He's actually there saying that actually even when we're looking at natural selection, there is very little testifiable stuff that we have actually got. And secondly, he's also saying that it doesn't explain all the aspects of genetics. It doesn't explain certain other things that are going on genetically speaking. So, there's contradictions and there's weaknesses in his recantation, but in that recantation, there's definitely no real recantation. He's not actually dealt with the issue of falsifiability. And even in his lecture, he's very careful and cautious to undergird the fact that these theories, even the best of them, are tentative explanations. He even undergirds that. So I would say it's a very weak recantation. It's a very contradictory recantation, but it's also a recantation that doesn't actually avoid the original statements that he makes about evolution, and he's not really broke free from the tautology that he was talking about. So that's dealing with the recantation issue concerning Karl Popper. The second thing I want to talk about is, if any atheist or people out there, you want to read the article and discuss the article, why don't you do that? Why don't you have an evening amongst yourselves as atheists around the world and on YouTube land, and read the article and have a debate and discussion on it, and creationists, and have a discussion about the article, because it's quite an interesting article. The second thing I want to talk about is the emergence of mind and the imploratory, this is a word I've invented, the imploratory, it's a word that I've invented, the imploratory nature of evolution. The imploratory nature of evolutionary science, so-called. So what do I mean by imploratory? Well, there is within evolution, Darwin noticed, and it's in Karl Popper's article, he couldn't quite square the fact that there is some kind of order in the biological structures, and he couldn't understand how that can be equated with chance. He couldn't quite really get his head around how those two, he had a process, he saw a process that he believed there was a process there, and natural selection was the process that gave the variation in the biological structures as far as he saw things. But he found it difficult to understand how chance was ultimately the mechanism to bring about all this variation, implying there is a natural selection within that. Now, a famous biologist, Monod, mentioned that evolution is of chance, and modern biologists don't like to talk about that. They don't really say that evolution is by chance. They tend to focus more upon the fact that there is a process of mutations, etc., and natural selection. And so to say that it's purely chance, from a modern biological point of view, they would negate that and say that that's not the case. But actually it is the case. Actually, Monod is right, Darwin is right, and that causes major issues, major problems when it comes to talking about, for example, the emergence of mind in evolution. Mind, the human mind, has logical faculties of reasoning. And the question is, how can non-reason become reason? How can chance become logical? And that is the imploratory nature of evolution. Imploratory means self-implosion. That within the system of evolution there is a logical inconsistency that implodes upon the whole system of this theory of science. And that is this. Karl Popper notes that in his article that you cannot deny that human nature is creative. And again, how does chance become creative? You can't deny Mozart, Bach, Rembrandt, Pollock, Chekhov, Tolstoy, that human nature has been creative. And if you're saying that evolution has been the product of this process, has been the process that has produced this, then how does that work in the area of chance? You see, and even within the very nature of the explanation that natural selection and mutation produce the biological structures, the very fact that you make the notation, the rational ability to be able to give a rational explanation of the process, is an imploratory aspect of evolution. What am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is this, is that chance has no reason, has no creativity. So the very fact when you describe a process, you are bringing in, you are reading in a rational order to that which is not rational. You have no basis to give a foundation of how creativity, consciousness, and reason come from non-creativity, non-consciousness, and non-reason, pure chance. I think you have to start with reason in order to produce reason. You have to start with creativity in order to explain creativity. You have to start with consciousness in order to explain consciousness. What evolutionists are doing is they're reading into that which is irrational, rationality. I mean, people like Van Til and Alvin Plantinga have noticed the imploratory nature of evolution. But it stands to my reason that the more you give an argument for evolution, the more you are proving evolution is not true, and you're strengthening the Christian position. Because the Christian position begins not with chance, but with reason. God is rational. And therefore, when we start looking at structures in reality and begin to rationalize about structures, we have a basis for our rationality, which is God. But if you start with chance, and you say there's a process called evolution, which is natural selection and mutation, and you give it some kind of rational explanation, you're assuming rationality, and you're reading rationality into a process. But that process is not, according to your particular position, rational. Yet, by its very nature, you're describing it in rational terms, which is contradictory. So evolution doesn't explain the origin of mind, but actually pushes you to see that there has to be a supernatural explanation of mind that a natural explanation of mind cannot possibly be made by evolution. That which is not rational is no. If the process is not rational, then how can it explain rationality? If the process is not creative, how can it explain creativity? But the moment you start to say that the process is creative, you're reading into something. You're assuming creativity as a basis to explain creativity without any justification for that creative assumption. You have to be logically consistent to your foundation. Your foundation is chance, so you have to be logically consistent to that. But to say that it is not by chance, but to say that it is chance with the process, you smuggled in the process and gave it a rational basis without giving a justification for it, because you're still in the foundation of chance. And I think that's where atheists, I think that's where evolutionists want their cake and eat it, but they have to be brought to the logical consistency, and they have to be made to see what their problem is, and they cannot be allowed to get out of it. They try to get out of it by saying, well, give us definition of chance. And so you know, chance is chance. Well, you don't know what the variables were at the beginning of time, so you can't say what chance is. And all these stupid statements. Chance is chance. Chance is a process that is not rational, but is random. And a random process cannot be creative or rational. So the moment you start to bring rationality and creativity as explanations in a situation, you are standing on a foundation that is not part of the basis of the foundation of the actuality of what you assume of what is stated in its perfunctory or foundational basis. It's kind of like if you had, imagine you had a mist here. You've got a mist, a cloud here, and you've got a brain here. This mist cloud, you say, is evolution, and it's creative, and it's rational. It brings rationality. It's just a cloud. So how can you talk about a cloud being the basis of a process of rationality and creativity? When you start saying there's creativity and rationality within the cloud, it's not within the cloud. You have brought something in foreign to the foundation of what you're basing your situation on. But if we start with the brain, i.e. God, and we see the history of the human race, and we start to say there is rationality within that history, there is creativity, well, we have the right foundation, because the foundation was God's rationality and creativity. So I don't take credit for this argument, really. Cornelius Van Til and Greg Benson are two apologists that I'm using to deconstruct Karl Popper's article and evolution, macroevolution. So those are my thoughts. Take it for what it is. Please go away and discuss it. I'll leave comments open if you want to ask questions, you want to debate and discuss, you want me to come on a show and discuss it. If you want to argue, start a Google Hangout somewhere and discuss the paper and think about it. Please do. All right. So my website is jasonburnspreacher.com, 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 jasonburnspreacher.com. Feel free, go on my website. Feel free to study and look at things. jasonburnspreacher.com. You can also go on my Twitter account, and there's lots of good videos of various scholars on there and Bible teaching. And I hope you enjoy it. And also, if you want to connect with me on Facebook, you can do. jasonburnspreacher.com, jasonburnspreacher.com. So if you've got any questions, any thoughts, anything you want to say, please do. Evolution macro has to be abandoned. The scientific community has not got good scholarship in this area. They are bad scholars. They are anti-intellectual, and they are supremely dogmatic and anti-scientific. People like Aaron Ra and Thunder, the intellectual mind of Thunderfoot, he used to phone me up. This is one of these people who believe in evolution. He used to phone me up regularly on Skype, and he was always drunk. He was always drunk. Aaron Ra used to phone me on Skype, and he was always angry, crotchety. On the more highly intellectual ones, like Dawkins, their writings are full of logical inconsistencies. I've read some of Dawkins' scientific writing, and I'm absolutely appalled. He is not a great scientist. I'm absolutely appalled that the scientific community take him seriously. You should not take him seriously. His scholarship is absolutely pathetic. The Blind Watchmaker book that I read was absolutely diabolical, and it's a shame. The Western intellectual tradition it should be ashamed of itself to lionize these kind of people with their works, because they're absolutely despicable scholarship. The lack of logical reasoning in Richard Dawkins is absolutely disgraceful. It really, really is. I mean, I'll give you a couple of examples. It's a long time ago since I've read The Blind Watchmaker. But he argues from what we know of bats, if I remember rightly. I'm talking about 4 or 5 years ago since I read the book. And if I remember, he goes on and on and on about bats, what we know about bats. And then from there, he uses this as a platform to attack Paley and to say that there is no design. And he makes so many assumptions in his logical reasoning. And the basic assumption is, because we know the way bats function, therefore evolution happened. And it was a tautology, complete, utter tautology. Because just because we know what bats, how they function, does not prove macro evolution, period. A tautology. And so the massive logical inconsistency, massive jump in logic without actually substantiating what you're saying. But people are blinded by it because they hear all this information about bats. Oh, and Dawkins knows what he's talking about. and they don't realize they've been bamboozled, they've been hoodwinked, they've been blinded by the fact that yes, you might know a lot about bats and the way bats develop, but that doesn't in any shape or form prove macroevolution. I could debate Iron Ra, Thunderfoot, Dawkins. I could debate any of these evolutionists, whether famous, not so famous, and beat them hands down in a debate on evolution, because it is not science. It is complete, utter fairy tale nonsense. And all the PhDs that these Dawkins and people like this have, they should be taken off. They should be taken back, because they're not worthy to have PhDs believing in this nonsense. You know, and it's about time the academic world have a conference and there be a coming out, that these scientists come out and start acknowledging that they're not it's not really substantiated, and to admit it, and to start admitting it. But they won't, because they'll lose their jobs, because they'll be fired, because they'll be vilified by the media, they'll be vilified by the academic community, they'll lose their jobs, they'll be thrown out, they won't have their books published, they won't have their papers peer reviewed. So it's fear. The reason why many academics won't come out and speak out against evolution is because of fear. It's because of the narrow-minded, bigoted people like Dawkins and the fifth columnist, who the politically correct brigade, and the intellectual elites who think that the custodians of Western culture. If you go against them, they will vilify you, they will ostracize you, and they will target you, and you will never be able to lecture in a university again. So scientists will not speak out. They will not say anything. But there are many, many scientists out there, many philosophers, many scientists that I'm sure are, well, I know that there are some famous ones that are on record of doubting evolution, macroevolution. They're on record of doubting it, and there are cracks there, but people are frightened. They are frightened to come out and say anything. And there should be an international forum where these concerns are heard and people are allowed to actually speak their mind in the academic community. A lot of research is being suppressed. There's tons of research that has been suppressed by Dawkins, Richard Dawkins, and many evolutionists who follow him. People who are brilliant in the fields of biology, genetics, etc., who've been stopped, who've been literally stopped in their tracks from doing research because of these people. People who've been kicked out of research departments, people who have published and been vilified and so are scared to publish again. People who have lost their jobs in top universities because of these people. Because we don't have a truly academic, the West does not truly have any real academic, intellectual discourse, because the whole foundation of the West at the moment, both in democracy and both in the intellectual field, has become narcissistic. It's become Dogmatic is become magisterial in the sense that they, rather than want to press and move forward in science, they want to hold on to power and to control and not allow any voices to challenge the status quo. Even when new information comes up and challenges macroevolution, they still suppress it, they still push it down, they still don't want to know what it's all about. Some of the most brilliant minds in the world today who are brilliant are being suppressed by this magisterium of Richard Dawkins and his henchmen, who will not allow people to actually debate, discuss, print peer reviews, and actually talk about these things. All this has been abundantly substantiated with documents. I could provide you with documents. I can provide you with information. I mean, I said top academics are questioning evolution. Am I lying? No. Thomas Nagel, top American philosopher, has put questions about evolution and its explanatory power concerning consciousness. You know, so I know what I'm talking about. I can give you documents upon documents upon documents to show you how evolutionists have suppressed academic research, suppressed even their own people who've maybe wanted to ask questions and they've been told, no, you can't ask questions, and they've been suppressed. So let's come down to, so let's bring it down to some basic things. Number one, Karl Popper's recantation. There was a recantation, but it was a recantation that was muddled, that was inconsistent, and that actually affirmed in an unwitting way his statement that evolution isn't just unfalsified. Macroevolution, that is. Secondly, evolution does not give us any explanatory power, macroevolution, as as to how the mind is evolved. The mind is creative and it's logical. You cannot get logic from chance, and creativity from chance. You could try all you want to try and get out of the problem by saying, oh, we don't believe in chance, or what do you mean by chance, or evolution isn't of chance, it's natural selection and mutation. But even Dawkins is on record accepting that the process is really, it is really chance. You've got to be intellectually honest. And chance does not produce creativity. It does not produce logic. And then thirdly, we just looked at Dawkins' scholarship and that it's tautological, and basically the academic world is in the area of macroevolution is dogmatic, magisterial, as in just like the Catholic Church had the magisterium where they controlled knowledge and they controlled people, so too is the academic world. It's very, very anti-intellectual today. It's very irrational, the academic world today, because we've moved in a more very narcissistic kind of irrational period in history where you can go on a university campus now and you can be an MP, you can be a top academic, and you can be booed by students and be booted off campus just because you differ from the mainstream students. That's the kind of irrationality that we're living in the world today. And this has unfortunately got a grip of the scholars in the academic world when it comes to evolution. If you don't believe me, When you go to college or you go to university, just in your biology class or school, just say, ask them, what has been the main test to try and falsify macroevolution? And you will not get not one teacher, not one lecturer, not one professor, not one scholar anywhere in the world that will give you an answer. Because it's not science, it's dogma. It's a political tool to keep Christianity down. That's what evolution is. It's a political tool to try and stop the influence of Christianity in the West. That's what evolution is. It's the West's whipping rod against Christ. That's what evolution is. It is a political tool that the West has used to try and destroy Christianity and keep Christianity down and keep Christianity away from the masses. That is what evolution is. And it's time that it was broken. It's time that it ended. And it's time we move forward into a new light, a new future of true science, of true logic, and of true reason. And it's time we dismantled this issue of evolution. It's time that we broke it, smashed it, and moved on to better things, better science, better logic, better reasoning, and a better future. And we are going to teach creationism. We are going to take it out of the colleges, take evolution out of the universities and colleges, out of the West, and we will put in place creationism, because it is better science, better logic, better reasoning than evolution. Evolution is not science. It is the most pathetic, disgusting, dogmatic theory ever known to man. And it's about time it was smashed, and we got it out of the schools, we got it out of the colleges, we got it out of the universities. So I would encourage you to start a movement to move out and take down all the evolutionary books, burn them out of the libraries of America and the UK. We need to get all these books and just burn them and start afresh, start new research projects, promote new research in new ways of looking at this issue from a biblical, Christ-centered focus, and look at a creationist position and look at it in a more logical, rational, and scientific way. That's what we need to do. That's how we need to move forward. Because these evolutionists are holding back civilization, they're holding back the future of mankind. They are retarded and holding back the human race. They are holding back civilization. They are holding back the future. They have no predictive power. Macroevolution does not have any predictive power, will not produce any fruit in knowledge. We're all about macroevolution here, not microevolution. But the tremendous potential of doing creation science will produce so much new knowledge, so much new information, so much technology, and that will help people in the medical sphere, in every other sphere. And many millions of people are suffering and being impeded through the blessing of a better science. We would be 50 years more ahead in science if it weren't for evolution holding us back. Evolution has held us back for 50 to 100 years. It's impeded our scientific progress. It's retarded us in the West. But what we need to do is to get rid of it and get back to creation science, get back to Genesis chapter 1 and 2. And as we get back to that, we'll see science progress and move forward rapidly and advance and take back the 50 to 100 years that we've lost. That is my take today. And that's my lesson that I learned from reading this article by Karl Popper. I've never ever met an evolutionist yet anywhere that actually has given any solid evidence for evolution. I've never met an evolutionist anywhere. I've even talked to PhD geneticists at Liverpool University, and I've not met any evolutionists that really know what they're talking about and actually given any evidence. And these people on the internet, on YouTube, they blind you and they waffle on all the various information that they waffle on. They blind you with science. But if you use good science and good logic, you can spot the mistakes. It doesn't need a lot of training to spot the mistakes and see that what you're being given is a tautology. Macroevolution is true because macroevolution is true. It's not science. It's a tautology. It's a tautology. Okay? It's a tautology. A tautology, or tautology. Macroevolution is a tautology. To say that it's science because to say that macroevolution happens because macroevolution happens is a tautology. And you have to stop your tautologies and you have to get to logic, reason, and science. So, don't be troubled by Dawkins or people like that. Don't be troubled by these people. Don't be troubled by them. If you just use simple reasoning, simple logical understanding, when you read these books. I need another example. A recent book that Dawkins brought out. I mean, like, you think I'm over the top and you don't know what I'm talking about. Well, let's see. Dawkins brought out a book, something called The Greatest Show on Earth, and it was his evidence for evolution. Again, macroevolution. And again, there was a massive logical fallacy. He used the fact that cabbages can change, the fact that you can make a cow change its physical physique over a few generations. And so therefore, if it can happen, if the change can happen with a cow changing in size, so therefore it can happen over millions, billions of years. Really, you're just doing a logical, you're making logical inconsistencies, and you're making assumptions, and basically you're being tautological. You're just ultimately saying it happens because it happens, and that's what they do. He showed cabbages can change. You can breed cabbages to be big, small, different colors. You can breed cows to be big, small, whatever. And because of that, that is supposed to be evidence for macroevolution, and that's a logical inconsistency. And that is all they're doing. It's logically consistent. Recent research in microbiology, recent research, this is cutting edge research, proves my point. Okay, this is cutting edge research. Okay, in 1980, so we'll put a bit of flesh on the bone. In 1980, scientists decided to see if macroevolution was true. Correct, yeah? So, how could they do that? The only way they could observe macroevolution is maybe doing bacteria, breeding bacteria, because bacteria, you can breed many generations and see something happen over time, which would, in human perspective, be many thousands or a million years. You would have to wait to see it happen in the humans to see if they changed. But with bacteria, you could do that in a certain amount of generations. So they multiplied bacteria, and they did up to today, up to recently today, from 1980 up to today, they did over 40,000 generations of bacteria, multiplying and multiplying, which is the equivalent to seeing the human beings multiply for over 1 million years. As they did that, they found that the bacteria was still bacteria, that the bacteria hadn't changed into any other form or in any other way. It was just still bacteria. That's solid evidence that macroevolution is just absolute nonsense. Now this is by evolutionists. This is by evolutionists doing the research. They did the research on bacteria and found 40,000 generations, which is up to 1 million years in human being breeding, that it's still bacteria. That's from evolutionists' own research. Okay, I'll leave you with that. God bless you. Have a lovely day. Don't forget my website, jasonburnspreacher.com. jasonburnspreacher.com. God bless you and have a lovely day. Take care. Please leave your comments, and if you want to debate and discuss any items, please feel free to make comments. Any disrespectful comments to me, you'll be just struck off. But please feel free if you want to make any comments. And feel free if you want to start a Google Hangout somewhere in the next week or two and want to discuss this video, feel free. Be interested to hear how those Google Hangouts go. And if you could pick up on the issues that I've made, discuss it amongst yourselves. Be very grateful to hear what you have to say. All right, take care and God bless. Bye now.